You're all set.
Thank you.
This is just a note that we are now live on the internet. Thank you.
Hi, Ignacio. Can we do a mic check, please?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We can hear you. Thanks. Hi, Bob. Can we do a mic check, please?
Good afternoon.
Hello. How are you?
Good, thanks, Dave.
Hi, Miguel. Can we do a mic check, please?
Hi, good afternoon, Dave. This is Miguel. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you.
Hello, Supervisor Chavez. How are you?
Good. Thank you. Just pulling out some new materials. Get myself organized.
You want to test your video when you have a second?
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Dave.
There you go. We've got you. Thank you. Hi, Rob. Would you like to do a mic check?
Sure, how's this?
We can hear you. Thanks.
Thanks.
Hello, Dr. Smith. Would you like to do a mic check, please?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Hello, Supervisor Cortese. Can we do a mic check, please?
Yes, this is Dave Cortese. I'm here.
We can hear you. Thanks. Do you want to check your, oh, there you go. Your camera's working. Thank you, sir.
Dave, is this your last committee meeting?
I think so.
Like, I'm not counting, but yes. Well, I'm glad you're here. I'm going to call our meeting to order. And I'm going to ask if the clerk can take the roll to get us started.
Vice Chairperson Cortese.
Here.
And Chairperson Chavez.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and get started. And our first order of business will be to take public comments. And this is for items that are not on the agenda today, but within the purview of this committee.
Are we going to start with a 3-minute public comment period?
No, well, can we do 2, please, Colin?
2 minutes. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just the timer. The next speaker is Scott Largent. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Good morning, everyone. Actually, sorry, good afternoon. Scott Largent. Sorry about that. Little Woodford had to run out to the van to talk with everybody. It was a horrible night last night with what happened at Grace Baptist. A lot of you know I participate with a lot of the events at the church there. It is the shelter that I stayed at in the beginning of the year when my housing fell through. And it's also a shelter that a lot of the people that are at the county building during the day take the light rail and go back down towards San Jose State and where they stay at. The 2 elderly women that I brought in to the supervisor meetings, the ones that were kind of out in the cold, and they also stay there. Combat war veterans stay there, grandfathers, younger children. It is the most open and inviting place to be at, and to actually have people that really care. The shelter beds were all at full capacity when I went through there, and they still let me in and they still help me, and I am very thankful for that. Sad part is right now we have several people that have died, 3 other people that are in the hospital right now. That area around there, they need more resources. They need more help. I talk about how downtown is a war zone now. The mentally ill, the meth-induced, just whack jobs now. It is wild. And you have this poor church that's trying to just, they're in the trenches. They're trying to save lives. And I say this, where's the county? Where's the outreach teams? Where's the behavioral health people? Where is everybody? And this is just a tragic thing that had to happen. And I think it could have been prevented.
And that concludes our list of speakers.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott. We'll go on to item 3, and this is to receive a report from the Social Services Agency Department. Department of Children's Family Services relating to the continuum of care. And just if I could, some opening comments about, why and how we are here. We scheduled it with the intention of having a deeper dive into the continuum of care transition plan. The board had been clear on July 21st board meeting of this year that a motion through Supervisor Cortese that the contract with Seneca would be for 1 year as we transitioned into services in-house. At that time, Supervisor Ellenberg also emphasized that she would not have been voting for approval if it were not for the urgent nature of the matter, and she agreed to the 1 year transition plan. The staff's recommendation for a 3-year transition plan does not align with board direction. And so part of the reason I wanted to hear this item today was to better understand the staff's direction and bring that back to the board. In addition to that, there was a lot of emphasis that was laid on the on plans for relocating the Welcome Center. And, I'll look forward to getting more information about that. We'll take public comment after the presentation, and then we will go back to the board for discussion. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Dan Little, Director with Department of Family and Children's Services. Good afternoon, supervisors and members of the committee. I'm just going to pull up a PowerPoint here to do a quick presentation. All right, hopefully that's showing up for you. So I'm going to go over a quick overview of the continuum of care. I know we've presented this in the past, but I think it's important just to set some of the framework. So across the state, state of California enacted the continuum of care reform. And the idea behind the entire reform was to get the children and foster youth and the children involved in child welfare out of congregate care settings. The largest immediate impact was the decrease in the number of group home beds that were available. And I think for Santa Clara County, that really impacted our highest needs youth with, I think, historically, were placed in group homes. And because of the number of group homes, were able to be placed in numerous group homes if there was a concern with the immediate placement. So children were placed in group homes and would become kind of a circuit between the group homes, which is what the state was trying to avoid with the continuum of care reform. When the reform passed and group homes started changing their license types, so group homes, some group homes transitioned to the short-term residential therapeutic programs, the STRTP. Some group homes decided to transition out to other services, and some group homes just ceased operating at all. Significantly decreased the number of those placements available, and then we saw the steady ramp up of children that were ending up at the previous rake. I think everybody is familiar with the situation that came up at the rake with the number of children that were there at any given time and the high needs of those children. Also resulted in longer stays and built upon the trauma that those children experienced. So conflicts in a congregate care setting tended to re-traumatize, build upon trauma that children experienced, and you saw kind of a domino effect with trying to control the population of that type of a setting. Where the state, I think, had good foresight was the idea that counties could create what a new continuum of care model looked like without a congregate care setting. So, I know Santa Clara County, among other counties in the state, are really kind of in varying phases of where we're at. I think we're actually a little bit in front of the curve, but we do have the opportunity to build a new system here, not relying on congregate care models, but looking at how we're looking at trauma and healing. So the three main components of our new continuum is the model of engagement and treatment for children to address trauma immediately following a placement, removal or placement disruption. This is oftentimes the most vulnerable time for our children, either immediately following a removal from a parent caretaker or a child that's been in a placement that experiences disruption and we don't have an immediate placement for them to go to. So that model of engagement from the very first moment that removal or placement disruption happens. Second is the appropriate placement options to meet the behavioral and treatment goals of every child. So this goes into the enhanced treatment foster homes. It goes into our pilot homes with our RFA. And it's going to go into some future work that we're doing with another provider I'll talk to at the end about recreating the residential treatment within foster homes. So what we saw at the receiving center and what we're seeing now with our scattered sites is still a smaller number of children that, due to their needs, we really need to work with providers to develop individualized care plans. In the past, those children would have gone to group homes. You know, when I first started here in 2017, the county was just working on finalizing the plans for short-term residential therapeutic programs. And at that point, we were planning on serving approximately, you know, I think it was around 56 to 58 youth and then that level of care based on historical needs of the children that we serve. And where we find ourselves now is we have a significantly reduced number of STRTP beds, especially in county, just based on providers determining that that model just wasn't a good fit for the work that they did. And this is not uncommon. We're seeing this across the state. The STRTP model is something that the state's really looking at to see how can we get better outcomes with that model. The third component is adequate planning to show each child's roadmap to permanency. So it's not enough just to find the appropriate level of care. Children need to know that we're working towards the next step for them. You know, that's the kind of age-old response that we would see where children would kind of lose hope the longer they were in out-of-home care. So this continuum of care really builds upon all of these. The welcoming center really meets item number one. So it's that initial engagement and treatment for children. The way I've kind of looked at the welcoming center model, it's similar to what we would do with the wraparound treatment of care model. And I'll explain that. Our prior model, like at the Rake, in our current model at our Keiki location, combines multiple teams from multiple agencies. So we have county DFCS staff providing kind of the care and supervision. You may have a child that has wraparound, so you could have a wraparound team on site. We have placement support services through an agency that provides immediate crisis response. So you have all these different agencies and teams kind of working within the same population of youth. The wraparound model really combines that all. So you have one team that can provide all of those different services and interventions within one team. So you start developing that shared collaboration and efficiency that are really beneficial and really created when you have that unique team. So the welcoming center model would do that. It would have, as in our case, Seneca would have the team that would have both the care and supervision responsibilities, as well as the treatment and de-escalation and engagement responsibilities. The other opportunity that we have with the continuum of care is we have a group of very well-trained, seasoned staff that have been providing care to these children that we can utilize for some extremely pressing and urgent need within the department. One of which being our need for increased visitation services and the transportation capacity that goes along with that. We were consistently short in the number of hours that we can provide to parent-child visits. These are court-ordered parent-child visits. And often the parent-child visit is really at the core of family healing and treatment of that family unit to assess when children can return home. We really need to see the quality and consistency of that visitation. So not having the capacity does hamper that. You know, with the staff that we have that are at the same classification at Keiki and at the scattered sites, would really supplement our current visitation services and really would eliminate the bottleneck and the delays we have right now for visitation. So the welcoming center, really the entire continuum, has a oversight and evaluation component built into it. So this is the RDA evaluation component. Has kind of three distinct phases as the discovery, the project launch, and planning, which is about 3 months. So that's where the RDA team works with the Seneca and DFCS teams to determine, you know, what are the outcomes, what are the measures of success? How are we going to determine when we're successful? What's the reporting criteria? And then you start doing the process evaluation. And that really is broken up into 2 phases. We have our process and outcome evaluation, and then we're able to kind of reassess to continue on with the next phase. The difficulty with outcome evaluation, specifically in child welfare, is giving enough time to be able to assess did an intervention actually impact the outcome that we're seeing? So I think that's why you see a more extended evaluation process here, because we want to make sure that any kind of policy or practice change, any kind of model change, that whatever outcome we're seeing, we can contribute to that. Because we don't want to be chasing around outcomes and process stuff. We want to make sure we have a distinct link into that. And I think by going through a robust evaluation process gives us that opportunity to say, is this model meeting the need? And if it's not, what is the model that would meet the need? This is the need to provide care and supervision to children while they are awaiting placement, the need to meet the needs of some of our most traumatized youth using treatment foster care models. Those are potential outcomes and potential interventions that can be around for a long time, but we need to make sure that they're going to meet the needs. We need to make sure that our policies and practices meet the need. And we need to make sure that the training the staff receive, again, meet the needs. So we do have a couple of location updates. One is I did reach out to a couple of the leads for the Child Advocacy Center program. And I think we all agreed that as far as locating within the actual space that the Child Advocacy Center has at O'Connor, that there wasn't going to be the space. And as somebody who's worked with a robust Child Advocacy Center, I would be worried about kind of mixing the two programs together within the same space. I do think, there was some information that we received from FAF regarding the actual building, and I think there are some actual limitations in the language of who can use the site. I think that social services is one of the programs that I think has it specifically outlined that we wouldn't immediately be able to use the space at that site. I didn't know if there was somebody else from FAF that had additional information, or we can do that at the end.
I can answer that now if you'd like, or we can wait.
I think go ahead.
That would be great, Dave.
Okay, so in reference to the facility, the lease that we negotiated allows for the premises to be used specifically as a child advocacy center, a medical office, and other general office. Any other use would require the landlord's consent. It also, and the county has an ownership interest in the building, but it is not the managing partner. So we are not the landlord, in other words. And it's a multi-tenant medical office building, has no outdoor facilities nearby.
Hey, Dave, how long is the current agreement going to be in place? Meaning, how long are we never the managing partner?
Hold on just a second. Let me
give you.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, let me give you a couple questions. One is I'd like to know how long the current agreement is for. Second, the length of time on the leases on the other two floors of the building. And third, the implications of changing the other two leases, the other two floors, would be ideal to know. Thank you.
I can give you an answer to part of that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
In terms of the partnership, this is a partnership we entered into when we purchased O'Connor Hospital. So the only way to get out of the partnership is to buy out the other side. And, we could certainly initiate that, but it's not a time-determined contract. It's a relationship, a business relationship with them being the controlling partner.
And Dr. Smith, what was the purpose in our investment in the building?
It came with the real estate from O'Connor. O'Connor had a previous partial interest, real estate interest in the building. And so when we purchased the hospital, we purchased all property owned and operated by the Daughters of Charity and subsequent Verity property. So that's how we got it.
And what's our interest in it?
Mostly that it has capacity for us to provide the services that you're talking about, the child center, and it's got a pharmacy. It also has houses the residency program, all of those things. So that it was a good real estate deal from that perspective.
Meaning we, since we don't have a controlling interest in it, we don't determine the usage of the facility.
Right.
Yeah, and thank you. That's helpful. And Dave, why don't you just get us the lease off agenda? Just that would help me understand a little bit more what the options are. Thank you.
Certainly, we'll do that.
Thank you. And I do have an update on Seneca. They got in touch with me late last week, and there is a site on 3165 Olin Avenue that they have actually entered into a lease. We're waiting on final confirmation that it's approved by both sides. That site is about 1.5 miles from the future site of the CAC. So by using like a mapping thing, it's about a 6-minute car ride. So I'm hoping to get more information on that this week.
Thank you.
So the other big update, I think, is the timeline. We had originally anticipated to be able to go live November 30. In working with State of California and Community Care Licensing, they have decided that they would like the receiving center to fall under a official licensing category, which is going to delay things in creating that. But I think the nice thing is they're actually creating a specific category for our program. So they were limited a little bit in the kind of umbrella licensing types that they can use. So they're using the framework of a transitional care shelter, but the actual operating standards are going to be for the welcoming center. So it's going to not have over 24-hour care. It won't incorporate having bedrooms and kids staying there. It really will be around the therapeutic and relationship engagement that's going to be happening and how that program is going to interact with the rest of the continuum. The state is in the process of creating operating standards. The delay is that we need to see those operating standards before we can actually do our formal licensing, or Seneca can do the formal licensing application. We are working concurrently, so the state gave Seneca kind of a framework of what they anticipate to be in the application packet, so Seneca is working on that. So the idea is that by early to mid-December, hopefully we get the operating standards, and at that point we can combine that with the licensing component that Seneca is currently working on and submit it in to have this new date by January 4th. That date's going to be contingent upon that licensing piece. In the follow-up meetings that I've had with the state, they're confident that they're definitely going to expedite this, and they're confident that we can move this forward quickly, specifically because they have prior history with licensing other programs with Seneca across the state. So I think it's just going to be the process of working through it. In the meantime, what we're doing is we're using this opportunity to build in what a warm handoff would actually look like. So Seneca leadership is working with DFCS leadership to have Seneca Welcoming Center staff start shadowing DFCS staff at the Keiki and at the scattered sites, so that Seneca staff can see firsthand the placement process that we do, the engagement with our DFCS emergency response, our safety and wellbeing social workers, so we can have that process in place so that when it's time to go live, we can actually go live that immediately. Just some updates. Seneca is on pace to have their entire Welcoming Center staff hired by December 7th. We have, again, on-site observation that's starting. By December 7th, Seneca staff will be trained on behavioral health screenings and assessment. That's part of the transition process. And then the policies and procedures, DFCS and Seneca has a work group that includes staff from all levels that have been working on policy and procedures. So we have a joint shared policy and procedure piece, which I think is key. Seneca will be training all of their staff on a regular basis and providing us updates if there's any issues with that. And then we will continue to meet weekly after program launch to review and update policies if needed. And again, that's something that's agreed upon that DFCS and Seneca are both committed to. And then the immediate and long-term outcomes. These are our initial kind of broader picture outcomes. Some of the specific child outcomes and the measurable outcomes will come through with the RDA process within the first 3 months. So again, Welcoming Center providing a safe and home-like setting for children who are removed from their caregivers. Seneca providing individualized supportive services for children. Services provided will be trauma aware, focus on healing care services. That the RDA's evaluation will allow full review of program and provide input to increase services and supports to children. Plan to do increased contract monitoring and on-site reviews. And this is something, again, that we're going to be doing across the department. So it'll be DFCS, social services, probation and behavioral health, all having a hand on monitoring. So we all have a shared understanding of what the outcomes are, and we can all make sure that we're monitoring this program. Seneca's therapeutic homes have begun and welcome children to care. So we already have a number of the Seneca therapeutic homes on board. We're anticipating 5 more by the end of the year. And then the result is all children we place with loving and supportive family or caregivers. That's our ultimate goal, is that we shorten the stay of these children in therapeutic placements. And from day one of placement, we're working on really what that transition plan and discharge plan is going to look like to get those children back with their families, back with their caregivers, back within their community. And then the next steps, finalizing the lease agreement. Again, I'm hoping to get an update on that this week. Seneca and CCL need to finish the operating standards for the provisional license to be obtained. Seneca still has to hire all of their staff. RDA, I believe that in the final stages of that, so we should be having that going here pretty quick. And then getting that operation going January 4th. I will add too that while we've been working on this initial phase of the continuum, we have been then working with our other foster family agencies to look at what capacity we can build within them. And we have some work going on with another agency. I think we should be submitting in a contract to the board shortly to expand to build another 10 and kind of super enhanced foster homes that are really going to replicate that residential treatment option, but within a foster home setting. So kind of get the best of both worlds, but the therapeutic intensity, but with the care and supervision and home-like setting that the foster home provides. So with that, that's the end of the slideshow. I'll open up for any questions. Thank you all.
Dan, thanks very much. I'm going to go to the public and then I'll come back to the board. We'll be giving each speaker, let me just give a minute to let the speakers get on board. And just to say, I think this is let me just look at the agenda to make sure. I think this is the only item and the only, outside of public comment, the only time to weigh in. So if you're interested in weighing in, this would be the time to do so.
Will that be a 2-minute timer?
I'm just waiting to see how many folks come on, because at some point I will cap the speakers based on the time available. Anybody else that wants to speak? This would be the time to put your hand up. All right, so each person will get 2 minutes.
The next speaker is Maggie Cocaine. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hi, I've been a resource parent for 7 years, and I've been following the Welcome Center closely since last November. During the community forums, DFCS touted the design of the Welcome Center as a transitory center with no beds, showers, or any home-like amenities for children. This avoids the need for a license, they said. Well, now the department is saying that Seneca must be granted a provisional license prior to opening the Welcoming Center. Is this because the children will need and will in fact sleep at the Welcoming Center? How are we not repeating the same failures the county had with the Emborg site? The county did a great job in separating the children when the scattered sites were created. Now we're going back to a one-site facility by eliminating the scattered sites, which is not the individualized care that Supervisor Cortese was adamant about during the moratorium. The key part of the continuum was building out more placement options so children have places to go and will not linger at the receiving center. Where is the update on the build out of new placements? Has the build out of these placements lowered the number of overnights at the current receiving center and or scattered sites? There were 147 overstays this year after the closing of Emborg. Where would these same children sleep at the Welcome Center? I would also like DFCS to clarify that the 27-month service agreement between the county and RDA encompasses the transition of the receiving center back in-house when the consulting contract ends after 1 year. as directed by the full board, and not surreptitiously transitioning the entire receiving center to Seneca for 3 years. I'd like to repeat that the board approved a consulting contract, not outsourcing the entire program, only to retransition it back to the county. Seneca was supposed to have a facility ready to go in DFCS claim of urgency and use their expertise to teach DFCS how to run a receiving center. Well, it's been nearly 5 months since the contract was signed, so there's no facility, and DFCS social workers are actually the ones teaching Seneca staff. The report states that DFCS staff will provide feedback and guidance to Seneca when supposedly DFCS failed so miserably that Seneca had to take over. I'm failing to see why the county is paying Seneca to carry out a core county responsibility that should be non-delegable. Thank you.
Next speaker is Carol Rhodes. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
My name is Carol Rhodes, and I'm speaking for the Juvenile Justice Commission of the County of Santa Clara. The JJC recognizes the enormous challenges of DFCS's work on behalf of children coming into the system, an environment where the fundamental issue is the chronic lack of sufficient numbers of appropriate placements for children with a broad spectrum of needs. The JJC has completed its report, Dependency System Receiving Assessment and Intake Functions, which was provided to this committee and will be published on the Superior Court website. It takes the place of the usual RAIC inspection report of past years and includes a brief history since the closing of the Union Avenue Children's Shelter 8 years ago. We appreciate the prompt response to our report that we received from the Director, Dan Little, noting progress. We'd like to call the committee's attention to the JJC's primary policy recommendation, and that's that a high-level, multi-agency and stakeholder panel, including CBO and foster family representation, be appointed with a simple and focused mandate. That's to analyze the systemic factors in Santa Clara County that, 1, drive the need for, and 2, impede the availability of enough high-quality foster homes across the spectrum of need, and to specify and quantify the remedies, including specific reimbursement and support levels that would bring supply and demand into balance. Children who come into care are our children and should be cared for as we would our own. Their trauma must not be compounded by our failure to place them promptly in skilled and loving homes. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Shannon Araujo. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hi, my name is Shannon Araujo. I've been a foster parent for about 8 years. Seneca has already entered into a tentative agreement and is awaiting final signatures, yet they have not shared the location with the public. It's almost as if they're purposely keeping it so that the neighbors will be kind of caught unaware. And we were told before that they would have meetings with the neighborhood so that they wouldn't run into the same problems that they ran into at some of the other sites. And I just want to make sure that we are keeping accountable these actions so that we don't run into some of the same issues we ran into before. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Vanessa Payne. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hello, my name is Vanessa Payne, alumni of foster care and social worker with Department of Family and Children's Services. I do want to remind the committee that back when the Board of Supervisors originally voted to pass the Seneca contract, there was hesitation by some board members. And with that hesitation, Dr. Smith had shared that it was basically a dire circumstance that we couldn't continue operating a keiki or a shelter. However, we now find ourselves in a position where we're extending it out even further time. Further, we're now looking at actually having a license that's needed. So again, my question goes back to, if we have everything within house and this contract was voted on based on this urgency, then why aren't we able to move forward with it in-house? And my concern is now the county is also asking to extend out this contract. which I feel at this time, it would be negligent of the county to allow a longer contract. We're in budget deficit. We're talking county layoffs, and we don't know how things are going to be affected to serve the children, youth, and families with COVID and everything that's going on. We really need to be mindful of and asking the county, and what the board told them was the collaboration of the contract. However, in the report today, there's been no indication of how this collaboration is happening. In fact, it sounds like there's a lot of piecemeal things going on, and we're building it as we go. But Seneca is supposed to be the expert in this. Furthermore, at one point, I read something that says if they don't have all their staff hired, they're going to pull staff from other programs. How is this any different than how we're operating right now? Our children deserve better, and we're not providing them better. And I ask that the committee really hold the department accountable to the things that the Board of Supervisors voted on. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Pam Kenyon. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hi, my name is Pam Kenyon. With my husband, I've been a Santa Clara County District 1 foster parent since 2003. Thank you for listening to our concerns. The opening of the background portion of today's report states, the County of Santa Clara is dedicated to protecting children who have experienced abuse and or neglect. This report uses the phrases, preliminarily a property to be acquired for the Welcoming Center. Once the site is acquired, we'll prepare. This site would require additional work to be ready. A provisional license can only be obtained after a joint agreement and other such contingencies. Well, there's a timeline, nothing is certain. December 7th is the projected date that all staff be hired, yet is only 4 weeks before the planned opening date. While some training appears to be in progress, how will new hirees be well trained enough to take on these specialized roles? Seneca's general orientation alone is 2 weeks. In my field, the strongest orientations for specialty care units are highly structured and 6 to 12 weeks long. If there are unfilled positions at the opening of the Welcoming Center, Seneca will develop a plan to use their staff from other programs when the DFCS already has capable staff to fill those roles. Engagement with more and more people and training as they go sounds haphazard when the goal for all of us is to limit changes and create consistency for our children. This doesn't sound like a good plan to prepare the people for whom the care of our vulnerable, highest needs, most hurt children will be entrusted. I see a lot of expectations of completion in what seems like a really short amount of time, and nowhere do I see mention of planning for training and transition of the DFCS staff by Seneca, which I understood to be a goal of this one-year contract. While there is a timeline, this all sounds too iffy and vague and not thoughtful enough for our children who deserve our best while in the care of Santa Clara County. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Alex. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hi, my name is Alex Lesniak, and I work exclusively with youth involved both in juvenile justice as well as the child welfare. I've been, preliminarily kind of watching the Welcoming Center, and it was my understanding it was originally supposed to open on July 1st. It was subsequently pushed back to November 30th, and now we're looking at a January date. In my own research on the CDSS website, it appears that intensive services foster care homes can only be held in a license through a foster family agency or through a county agency. I'm curious as to the department's exploration regarding making our own licensed ISFC homes that are focused on working with youth who've experienced some of the most severe trauma, turning our satellite homes, which we're currently operating, if I recall correctly, on an unlicensed condition. There are a ton of dedicated workers within child welfare, within behavioral health, and within juvenile probation who may be willing to work with the county to develop in-house ISFC homes so that we can immediately work with youth and families when they do come in. Additionally, I am hearing that it sounds as though DFCS has begun to train Seneca in this, and less so about Seneca coming in and teaching DFCS the best way to go about working with youth who have suffered some of the most severe trauma. My ask would be that the board consider not just what's presented now, but has been represented since the end of last year through today, and note the changes. Thank you.
The next speaker is Sandy Orlando. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Foster parent for 20 years. It's disheartening to see that DFCS is forging ahead with a long-term plan to outsource the Welcoming Center, along with responsibilities for assessment and placement to Seneca, despite clearly stated concerns and objections of many Santa Clara County social workers and resource parents. The transition 2 years ago for Seneca to manage the RAS team, which is a vital support service for resource families, was inadequate and lengthy due to staffing shortages and inexperience. It took months for Seneca to hire and prepare enough staff to serve the needs of Santa Clara County resource families. Now, Seneca's revolving door of managers are tasked with hiring to fill vital positions that experienced DFCS workers have been doing for years. So please understand why many of us are skeptical that this transition will lead to improved outcomes for vulnerable children and to meaningful improvements that our foster care system needs. Rather, I expect this outsourcing transition will create more chaos and lead to severe problems for social worker and resource family recruitment and retention. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Scott Largent. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Good afternoon, everyone. Scott Largent. I'm speaking from experience right here. I'm the product of our group home / foster care system here in Santa Clara County. Over 30 years ago, I entered into that system and I was pretty much outsourced. I was chained to the floorboard of a minivan and drove 9 hours up to Reading. And this went on for almost over 2 years. Currently at the moment right now, I'm very concerned that my daughter eventually will enter into this type of system. Now, this might sound strange, but my daughter is growing up without a father. Her clean and sober father. And come December 25th, it will be 5 years that I have been clean. Seneca recently reached out to me, Kim Wayne. I was very excited to hear from her. They are trying to figure out a way to help me in my situation. I do not want to have my daughter enter into this. The routes to be able to get help are turning it into a dependency case, assigning minors counsel through Santa Clara County, and it just repeats a vicious cycle that my little girl does not need to deal with. I'm not on probation. I'm not on parole. I don't really have a criminal record. This stuff could have been taken care of outside of myself or my daughter entering into the system. I am begging for help. I have earned the right to be in my daughter's life. December 25th, that's 5 years. I got sober when my daughter was 6 months old. I got to spend more time with my daughter on methamphetamines than I have been able to spend with her being actually sober. And I'm begging you, Cindy Chavez, Dave Cortese, you guys can do the right thing. You can make the right calls. I deserve to be a father. Please help me.
That concludes the list of speakers.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your thoughts on this item. I'm going to turn to Dan, and Dan, see if there were any of the comments you wanted to respond to before I go to the board.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor. I think there's a couple that I can provide some clarity. The license for the Welcoming Center was something that early on we were not told. It kind of evolved in working with the state. But I would be clear, it's not a license to have a shelter. It's not a license to have children staying there. It's a license for a program there to have licensing standards and operational standards, but not as a license to turn it into a prior rake or a new rake or a new shelter. So it's not a license that would even allow that kind of operation there. And I think the other piece that due to, I think, how we split out the care for the children last fall, I think has been confusing, is the prior operation of the rake is really looking at two different types of programs today. We have the scattered sites, which is really the children that would have been placed at the old rake shelter. And then you have the keiki, which is children that are without a placement, that are just removed from a parent or that have a placement disruption. We don't have an immediate place for them to go. So the children now go to keiki while our DFCS social workers are looking for placement options. Then if it gets to the point where we have a child that we can't locate a placement, then they go to the scattered site, which in the old world would have been a bed in the rake. In the new world, the scattered sites are replaced by the intensive treatment foster homes. So the different levels of treatment foster care, the foster homes that we're going to be building with this other provider to replace the STRTP. So the scattered sites are a direct, are the ITFC and E, the enhanced treatment foster care, are a direct replacement for the scattered sites. The welcoming center then becomes that engagement component where children that are removed are without a placement for under a day can go, and under this new model, they receive the therapeutic engagement to potentially de-escalate, to help regulate, to help assess further, to determine the next level of care that this child would need. So any child that would be at the welcoming center, again, it's not going to be a placement. We're going to keep the scattered sites operating until we build the capacity through these other treatment placements. But the state's made it clear that we can't keep operating both of these programs. We're able to do it now because we're working with them on this plan. But the plan with the full continuum, including the welcoming center and including the new treatment level foster homes, are to replace both the scattered sites as well as the keiki. The concerns about DFCS staff training Seneca, I think what's happening is there's shadowing going on for DFCS program guidance. For, in the welcoming center, the Seneca staff would be responsible for engaging with our emergency response social workers on a removal, our safety and well-being social workers for a placement disruption, and our placement social workers when we're looking for a placement for a child that's there. So the shadowing and any kind of training is really for them to become familiar with those processes, because they're going to have to engage with those staff. It's not the training of how to care for the kids at a site like that. And the last clarification too is there's not going to be a transition of placement responsibilities to Seneca. So DFCS still maintains the same responsibility to identify, approve, and place children within any level of care, whether it's foster care or treatment level. Seneca, just like Uplift and just like Rebecca and other programs, have licensed foster homes, but it will be DFCS's job to identify and to approve any kind of placement in any of those homes. So I hope that helped clarify any of the concerns that came up during public comment.
Thank you. I wanted to see if Dave had any comments or questions before I go through mine.
Yeah, I guess I'm still unclear, listening and looking to my notes, as to the difference that the distinction that you were calling out, Supervisor Chavez, between 1 year and 3 year approval here in terms of the Seneca contract. I heard at the very end of Daniel's presentation or response just now that Seneca is doing some shadowing, but DFCS is still doing the placements. So I'm unclear as to what Seneca is doing. I mean, I know Seneca can be a placement outcome or be involved with the outcome, just like Uplift and others. And that was just reiterated. So are they, I guess I'm not really clear what their role is and why that role needs to be pre-designated for 3 years. And I might as well throw a second question out there, which is as to Kiki, as long as that exists, what is the maximum temporary placement stay that we're allowing there?
Yes, Supervisor, thank you. So the current role Seneca has is to get their staff ready to operate the Welcoming Center, which would be kind of the direct correlation to Keiki. So what they're doing right now is working with our staff to understand the county's policies and procedures so that when they are responsible for providing oversight to children in the Welcoming Center, they'll know what our placement social workers need from them, and they'll know what our emergency response social workers would need. The Welcoming Center itself, when that becomes, when we get the provisional license and that becomes operational, Seneca can take over. Seneca then would then become would have primary responsibility for supervising children in between placements. So if a child is removed from a parent or caretaker with the Welcoming Center in operation, our DFCS social worker would take that child to the Welcoming Center. Seneca staff would then engage that child in a therapeutic relationship and engagement to find out the needs of that child, to then get information back to our placement staff so that our placement staff can start doing the search for an appropriate foster home based on their needs. So the Seneca staff would provide both the care and supervision while we're looking for the placement, but would also begin that therapeutic engagement, potentially de-escalation based on the trauma, potentially some of the initial healing to be able to have that child ready to go into whatever the next placement is. So, that's why I was comparing it earlier a little bit to the RAP model, and that it's a team approach where you have both child care staff, child supervision staff, which is similar to what DFCS has right now, as well as a clinical aspect to the team that are all able to meet the needs of that child when they first hit the door. At no point would that child reside there. So once we build the continuum out, and that includes some of the emergency foster homes, if we get to a place where we have a child that's been at the Welcoming Center and it's coming on a full day, then we would have to look at moving that child to one of those emergency foster homes, because at no point again can we keep that child at the Welcoming Center longer than 24 hours. At Keiki, we have had a couple of situations where we have children there longer. The vast majority of those have been when there's been a need based on the child's behaviors to have them placed there versus at a scattered site, or some of the COVID is kind of throwing a wrench into everything. So when we've had to move children around based on possible or confirmed COVID exposures, we have had to be creative with where we've had some of the children.
I guess my understanding from the previous board direction was that in order to avoid what you just described with Kiki and difficult placements, that for difficult placements on an interim basis, or at least, and perhaps on a permanent basis, that some of these scattered sites would actually be run and controlled by the county. And in fact, it was my understanding that as sort of a temporary measure to get out of the rake, once the board moved us out of that mode, that at least some sort of temporary county run, I'm using your term loosely for my own purposes here, facilities or scattered facilities would be available so that you go directly from Welcoming Center to outside placement. If outside placement doesn't fit, you don't fall back to a Kiki, which sounds a lot like a rake. You go to a county run placement, which could be two social workers housing someone in a residential facility that we've created that doesn't depend on outside expertise, but falls back on the full faith and credit of county expertise, whether that's behavioral health, mental health, drug and alcohol, justice system, VMC, whatever. So that's the part I'm not, what's happened with that? That I thought we had that capability, and why isn't that then built in so that we just don't need this Kiki option?
Yeah, and I apologize, I wasn't clear. Once the Welcoming Center opens as operational in Kiki, we would cease utilizing Kiki. So the kind of next phase would be, we would have the Welcoming Center. We'd still have our scattered sites. And the replacement for the scattered sites are these additional treatment level foster homes that still need to be built. So we should have 10 additional between two providers by the end of the year into the beginning of the next year. And then more from Seneca into the year. The The scattered sites were, you were right, they were a replacement for the rig to allow us to provide kind of individualized care for children who were without a placement. But we do need to transition those children into licensed kind of treatment models. So the treatment model that we have available to us is going to be those enhanced treatment foster homes. They take a little bit of time to recruit and train, which is why I think that, you know, we're seeing kind of a trickle of them coming on board, but I am optimistic of those 10 that we'll have by the end of the year. The plan that we're going to have is when we can go 30 days without having a child in a scattered site, then we can start sunsetting that particular site. So when we show that we've built a capacity in those treatment level foster homes, then we'll be able to sunset those scattered sites. We won't have a situation where we have Welcoming Center and Keiki going at the same time. So we don't want a situation like you're describing where we have children going from the Welcoming Center and we can't find placement and we're sticking them back over at Keiki. So
okay.
In between the scattered sites until we can build the additional capacity of those foster homes.
Yeah, so wouldn't it be prudent to have some, well, first of all, my belief is what the board was calling for is that that Seneca would essentially consult us into proficiency in running the Welcoming Center in-house as soon as possible, which thus the 1-year option. And then secondly, also in terms of sort of county in-house capacity or proficiency, wouldn't it make sense for us to maintain some county capacity long-term with the expectation that at some point, for whatever reason, the number of the intensive foster facilities or foster placements might diminish or lag or, you know, become de-licensed or unlicensed through no control of ours. I'm trying to foresee the possibility here that whatever, a couple years down the road, you folks you, Daniel, aren't coming before the Board of Supervisors saying, geez, we had a great setup. You know, we had 10 of these intensive foster placements. We basically shut down the rest of our capacity. We didn't think we needed them anymore. And guess what? You know, 3 of them got disqualified. 2 of them had a problem and they're under investigation. We have 5 left. And now we're housing people at the Welcoming Center, you know, for more than a day because we don't have any placements left. You know, I am trying to avoid that, like a third repeat of history here, because history has already repeated itself once in that regard, where we made a shift, you know, from my view, admittedly, but we made a shift from a children's shelter to, you know, a sort of 24-hour placement model that sort of broke down because essentially outside places became more and more difficult. And then we had to fall back to using our placement center, our 24-hour center as something longer term or a stopgap, which is how we got to where we are today. So I'm sorry to ask 2 questions that, again, I'm asking you 2 questions at a time today, but one is, at what point would we be scheduled for Seneca essentially to be strictly a non-Welcoming Center outside contractor? And 2, is, you know, a year or what, your perspective? And then 2, how can you guarantee us that you're going to have enough intensive treatment foster capacity that we aren't going to need in-house capacity for that as well?
Yeah, I'll start with the second one. I think, you know, I wasn't around for the kind of original go at this with the old shelter.
And by the way, that's not a blame thing. I'm just trying to explain the history that I know of, my lived experience, if you will, as an elected official. If none of the rest of you were here, I'll take full credit and blame for whatever happened back then. It's not a blame thing. I just wanted to make sure I laid that out so you would understand why I'm once bitten, twice shy.
Yeah, no, and I was just saying that because I may not know all of the strategies that were used previously. What I can say for what we're doing today is really twofold. It's the engagement with the broader CBO community that provide this care. The agreement and partnership we have with the state right now, it's allowing us to have a little more flexibility that I think definitely we had in the past to create higher levels of care and foster care. Because I think, again, in the past, once you got to a certain level, the thought was always defaulted to congregate care. So we always relied on that congregate care safety net. And I think we're by now that wouldn't rely on that. The, you know, this has come up several times as a concern, and I want to just assure we can't do this with one provider. So, I mean, this really has to be a system approach. And I think having all of them, all of our main foster family agencies that also have specialty mental health services come to the table and stay committed to it, with the understanding that this isn't the recruitment and training and onboarding of foster families that are happening between now and, you know, the end of the year. That's not the only time this happens. This is going to have to be a continual thing. And I think as part of the program evaluation piece has to look at this. It has to look at the sustainability of this kind of a model. Because you're right, we don't want to create something just to see us back in the same space. I think the other piece that we really have to look at is statewide, we're in a different space right now with the flexibility to open up any kind of additional congregate care kind of models. So I wouldn't be able to sit here today to say that DFCS could have kind of a secondary congregate care model, because you know, what I've heard from the state is anything like that now they're really lumping into requiring an individual license. So there'd have to be discussions about doing that and kind of what that would look like. You know, I think this proposal and I think the time frame, I think allows us to take a deeper dive than maybe we had in the past to say, what is the actual model that we want? How are we going to best meet the needs, and how do we make sure it's sustainable, to your point? You know, I think that we could get something built in pretty quick, but is it going to meet the need long term, or is it going to find us back kind of in the same space? So, you know, I think the partnership with the state, the partnership with our CBOs around the importance of meeting the need, the messaging that congregate care is not going to be our future response, that we're limiting that. And I think really the last point I would make around this is the work that we're doing on the prevention side, the work we're doing with CAS, with the new AB 2083, with FFPSA, that my vision is to drastically decrease the number of youth entering care across the board, to decrease the need for any these kind of services. And you know, I know that behavioral health is interested in partnering with us to say, how can we make sure that we have adequate support for families before coming into a child welfare system to meet the needs of some of these children that we're seeing in our system now. The work that we're doing with First Five to get services and supports available to the community, again, before foster care is needed. So I think the combination of the partnership we have with the state, the partnership with our local stakeholders, and then the work we're doing now across the prevention, I think really is going to set the system up to look differently than it did in the past. I think the population we're serving is going to look different.
Okay, and on the individual license needed for the county to build its own in-house capacity in terms of, you know, in terms of being sort of what I guess I'm calling a fallback to the to any degradation of the intensive treatment foster families. If the state allowed counties with behavioral health capacity like ours to build that intensive foster fallback capacity in-house without a license, would that change your perspective on this, or would there still be concerns besides that, like we don't have the money, or we'd rather contract out anyway, or we don't think we have the in-house expertise, or our employees will never learn how to do it, or that's what I think I'm hearing some of that even in the public comment we heard today, you know, in terms of concerns. What's this really about? Is this about something else, you know, not licensing? Like we just don't trust our own capability to do what either Seneca is helping with the Welcoming Center, or with this intensive, this intensive foster outplacement?
I think it's two. I think I would be hesitant to develop a plan that says that the county's going to have a safety net kind of congregate care site, because what I've seen locally and what I've seen across the state is that becomes the place of last placement. That the system kind of knows that that's available, so it kind of equalizes to use that. So I think that's why I'm a little hesitant. I think the other piece is.
But wait, if you don't mind, I wasn't talking about a safety net congregate site. I was talking about safety net individual placements.
Gotcha. I think where we have opportunity to do that is in the work that we're doing with our own RFA families, to build in with our pilot to have higher needs youth in our some of our pilot homes. I think that's where we have a tremendous ability to build some additional capacity that we don't have right now. We're currently working with County Office of Education, who has a contract with a provider that provides specialized training for autism youth. So we're looking at ways that we can bring that training to our some of our pilot homes. So I think the plan that I'm exploring is really, we do need a capacity. We do need to make sure we have capacity, building it through that foster family model. And I think that keeps everything in line with what we're trying to do here, which is make sure that we have children connected to a family level type care that can help transition children back to their families.
All right, and I'm not sure you really answered the question about 1 year or 3 year in terms of Seneca's involvement with the Welcoming Center.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the challenges we have right now is based on, I think, just circumstance that happened this last year, and then now the licensing piece that we're starting the Seneca works so late, that it's going to be hard pressed for us to have kind of any kind of outcomes to show between now and the end of this fiscal year. The longer, in my opinion, the longer that we can have an evaluation go, the more opportunity we're going to have to be able to measure the success of the immediate interventions that we're doing. And I think, to a point that's been made, this is not new to try to do something like this. I don't think it's, I think there's other systems that have tried this. And I think the challenge has really been to connect the interventions we're putting in place with the outcomes that we're seeing. So the ability to do that, I think, can potentially set us up for a more success moving forward in the future.
All right. Well, I understand the rationale. I guess I'm getting at what I thought I heard Supervisor Chavez say, and I'm, given the Brown Act and any number of other constraints, including time constraints of late, I haven't talked to her about this beforehand. So the first I heard her talking about possibly sending this Seneca contract back to the board for clarification was today when you heard it. But it seems to me that at some point, if there's either a discrepancy between the board direction and the staff's wants and needs in terms of this contract, that would need to go back and be clarified to either ratify the way you're wanting to do it now, or to, if the board wants to reassert a shorter term contract. That's just, I think that's just basic, good government 101. So maybe that needs to happen, but I'll stop there and defer to the chair of the committee at this point. Thank you. And I appreciate all your, effort to answer my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. So I'm gonna just give some feedback based on some discrete kind of buckets. And one is that, and Dave, I'm really glad we were able to get this hearing before you left, because you're the only person who's been with Daniel and I through this process. And I was nervous about starting with somebody new on this particular body of work, more just because of timing. But let me just talk about the three areas that I'm interested in discussing. One is process and evaluation. The other is services. And then finally is a little bit around location and the co-location of services, which may end up being a bit of a different topic. One is that I think that that the board, myself and Dave have requested that we have an engaged, that we are engaging frontline staff, resource parents, and our nonprofit partners as we're, I think what you're endeavoring to do is really to redesign our services. And I'm a little concerned. I don't know if there's anybody here from behavioral health, but a big part of the discussions we've had in the past have been with behavioral health on the appropriate use of the, not just the site, but what kinds of services are provided, how do children and families get access to these services. And one of the things I was really concerned about, and I'm glad Dr. Smith is joining us today, but one of the things I was really concerned about in this area was that it did not appear to me that we have a consistent either philosophy or mechanism or tool for doing outreach communication, getting feedback, and then taking next steps. I know that you have a lot of processes going on through the department right now, Dan, but I think, and I do think this has to come back to the board because it is a different direction than the board gave, but I think as part of that board discussion, we should also embed in what the communication process is, as that has not been consistent or clear to me, nor have I felt like it's been clear to the folks that are impacted. And I'm glad. Thanks, Margaret, for joining us. I'll just say that both departments, I think we need to have this really built into our DNA. The second is related to the evaluation and planning process and making sure that we're including frontline staff and foster families and resource parents, and also foster children as appropriate in getting their feedback about their experiences and what their needs and desires are, so that the evaluation, to your really important point, that we're really taking our North Star, which is seeing less families in our custodial care, and that we're really understanding how all of these services are the launching point to meet the ultimate goal, which is having children in appropriate placements. I thought, I think this is what Carol said earlier that I thought was just really exactly right, appropriate placements, and that including home. And then how are we evaluating that? And then as I shared with staff, I do have a concern. Yeah, Dr. Smith, I'll come to you right after this last point. I do have a concern about RDA. I raised that concern with staff and really requested that we either consider an RFQ or an RFP, or that we are looking for and refining the partnership that we have with an evaluator that has the ability to do a high level of analysis. And my experience with RDA is that they've been good partners in a number of areas, but that what they're most skilled at is really reflecting back on the staff what we are doing. And that's not necessarily bad, but in this instance, the analysis, the detailed analysis that we're going to need, particularly as it relates to how we do and how we understand our assessments relative to equity and other outcomes of the program, to me really call for us to be looking for partners that have a high level of skill in terms of that sort of analysis. And I'll just say, Dan, this isn't really this is more of my reflection on, I read a lot of reports, and I know the difference between analysis and reflection. And so I raised that concern. I can see that my concerns were not heeded, but I'm just going to say that to you now because I remain concerned. So Dr. Smith, well, let me just, this last statement is that if our goal really is not just to bring the services in-house, which is an important goal, but it really is to provide the highest level of service we can to these high-need children and their families, then, I would like to see that more reflected as we move forward. I'm going to go to Dr. Smith real quick before he has to jump off or go to another meeting.
Yeah, I'm sorry, supervisors, that I have to go to another meeting in about 20 minutes, but I did want to have a chance to at least explain from my perspective what's going on. I totally appreciate Dan's approach, and what I would say, trying to put the entire episode in perspective, is that we and the rest of the state had a unsatisfactory approach to kids that were very troubled and didn't, were difficult to place. And that unsatisfactory approach was group homes. Luckily, after many years of criticism, the state took the initiative. Actually, our previous director of social services took the initiative to formally end that model and to create the STRTP model through Continuum of Care. However, just like other counties, the systems of service were not developed before that switch occurred, and that's why we ended up with our major problems at the rake. And as the board discussed, and I think Supervisor Cortese led the directive, that we needed to get out of the rake business, which was effectively turned into a group home by the CCR changes, and move into a dedicated program of separate services. And that's what we've been doing so far. And I don't see us stopping that model of the distributed care services, but we are trying to cooperate with the state in developing a welcoming center, which would take the place of both the Keiki Center and what used to be the rake, and then develop rapid access to emergency foster care services and more appropriate placements. I think, when we talked about this about 6 months ago at the board level, about it taking hopefully only about a year to develop a welcoming center and a network of improved placements, we were presuming that the licensing requirements would not be changed on us, and indeed they were. And there were new licensing requirements for STRTPs that were just put out 2 months ago by the state. And in addition to that, as Dan pointed out, the state still has not developed operational policy regulations that will prevail in a welcoming center kind of model. So we're 5 months into the process and not a whole lot closer to actually having a welcoming center and a state-of-the-art distributed placement center. So I think that the plan from my perspective is to try to transition to county employees as soon as possible, but doing it in the middle of the licensing process without knowing the organizational regulations and the treatment regulations would be, in my opinion, a recipe for failure. And we obviously missed the 1 year timeline because of what happened with state regulations. So I would hope that we would be able to keep the decentralized distributed care system alive, and that's the intent, to keep it going until we feel like there's a stable network of final placements, emergency foster homes and links to foster homes. And all of that would be supervised by our own social workers and DCSF. And then once we get a license for a welcoming center, that process of transitioning to our own employees could be done. So at this point, I think the reason for the delay can be obvious, and we're working as fast as we can to move the entire process in-house, but at this point, I don't think we can realistically predict that'll happen in the next few months.
Yeah, I guess what I would just say, thanks, Dr. Smith, for that. I think that what I'm just suggesting is this should go back to the board, and I think, for full explanation. I think whenever there's a deviation, we should just explain why and explain what the pivot is, and that would be really, really critical. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We should probably schedule this issue for some regular visits to the full board. I know that Family and Children's Services wants regular updates, but I'll let you decide when it should go to the board. Obviously, the whole board should hear it.
Yeah, I think if the contract's different, we should bring it to the board before Christmas, because the contract is not what the board voted on. So we should do that quickly. And that's the point that Dave raised about just good governance. I think in terms of what meeting in December, I know you have to manage the agenda, but it should happen before the new year.
Okay.
Thank you. The other thing I wanted to just highlight, and this is under bucket B, which is how we're approaching the services for children. And I am very excited that we're going to be getting additional intensive therapeutic foster care services and having that, much more deeply in the community, and working with our nonprofit partners and foster families who can really play that role. I would like to get, when this item comes to the board, just an update on where we are in the process for the 10. And part of the reason I'm asking this, Daniel, is that my recollection from discussions really that we were having probably over 2 years ago was that we were in need of between 10 and I thought the high number was 16 of these types of particular facilities. And I just want to make sure we have an assessment of the need, because I think the challenge we're going to have, in addition to these homes, there's also family finding and foster care recruitment that I know are all part of the body of work that you're looking at. But these homes, if we don't have these really high-level emergency placements pretty readily available, then the point that Supervisor Cortese raised about going right back to where we were is inevitable. So I would like to make sure that we have an update, and also at least one paragraph of an analysis of the capacity of the 10 and why we're confident with the 10, and when we will, if we will need to move up, what does that timeline look like? And then also, as the ledge file is not clear on the training that Seneca is receiving. And I would just ask that to be further clarified when this comes back to the board. And what I mean by that is you talked a lot about perhaps Seneca needing to understand the county systems and shadowing people to understand the systems. I think that we're relying on Seneca to inform us more on trauma-informed practices, therapeutic and behavioral intervention in partnership with behavioral health departments. So if we're training them on that, that's just something else that the board will want to understand, because I think that's a little bit confusing in the staff report. And then item C is had to do with the placement of the welcoming center. And again, I think just making sure that when this comes back to the board, that the denoted location is clear, and there's a little more notice than we were able to get for this meeting. But the other thing, and I'll just say this is more for Dave Barry, is that, and Dr. Smith, I know he had to leave, so maybe Miguel, this is something that you could just make sure that Dr. Smith understands, is that we have services for really for foster youth in a number of different locations, and one of them is the Spark Clinic. And I just want to say that one of one of the things that we're really trying to do is make sure that children get access to their medical appointments. And one challenge we've had is that with older young people, older teens, that getting them to go to these medical appointments is not, and it's a pretty significant challenge. And so the one thing I want to make sure we're thinking about is proximity to our clinics, so that medical assessments, behavioral health assessments, all those assessments are very, very easy to get our young people in. And it's why I've been curious about the building, and I'll look forward, Dave, to reading the report, because it had always occurred to me that if we were having the Child Advocacy Center, that we would be looking at placing the clinic relatively close. What's currently the Spark Clinic in downtown, and not tomorrow, but it makes sense that on one of those floors we would be looking at placement, in particular because the downtown clinic's already pretty crowded with the number of services that we've put there. So I think no matter what, we're going to have a little bit of a crowding problem at some point anyway. I actually think we have it now, but at some point anyway. And so really looking at whether or not it makes sense to expand closer to O'Connor. And then the other thing that Dr. Smith talked to me about is I've been very interested in us developing a center that's really focused on children's health and behavioral health and mental health. And one of the locations that Dr. Smith was encouraging me to think about was the O'Connor campus for that too. And so it does seem like we're looking at a lot of children's services at that campus. So I would just want to make sure that, again, when this comes to the board, we at least have the board understands the limitations with the current current site, that we know where the welcoming center is going to be, and that there's a strong understanding long-term of whether or not we will be researching and investigating pulling more services around O'Connor as a facility, maybe if it's not even all in the same building. So those are just some requests, because I think it will help clear up and help us all do better planning. Is there anything you wanted to respond to, either Dave or Dan, that I just raised?
I'm happy with the general direction in the concerns you just outlined. I just like my concerns to be part of the record. What I was fishing for a little bit is if there's changes in state law that are necessary to streamline and expedite the process of a big county like this that has tremendous behavioral health expertise and tremendous expertise from the top to the bottom, from the county executive literally on down in terms of the healthcare aspects of this, to be able to stand up this kind of in-house work, quickly, it's certainly capacity, but it's also just what I'm hearing is, bureaucracy and licensing requirements and standards and whatnot that I suspect are really well placed, in terms of outside contractors, families, the sort of the mimicking of family units that happens externally for a variety of reasons that all come back to accountability. I think the county needs to be accountable too. That's why we're here today. But I also think that 6 degrees of separation don't necessarily get you accountability. To be able to be self-accountable, there's something to be said for that. And I'm not sure that every county, I also understand that not every county in the state is equipped to do the kinds of things, a Santa Clara or a San Francisco or an LA or an Orange or, a big urban county can do that has, has expertise. But that's something I hope the board and the administration and IGR will continue to revisit in the future in terms of, making sure that we're not trying to operate under archaic rules that have helped, in a sense, put us in this position in the first place. So, that's one thing. Secondly, you already talked about the contract going back for clarity. And then lastly, this Well, I'm going to just leave it there. I'll leave it there. I think you touched upon everything else, and I don't want to be redundant or rehash or anything. Supervisor Chavez.
Thank you. And Dan, do you feel like you have everything that you need? Do you understand what we're asking for?
I do. Thanks, Supervisor.
And any other thoughts or comments before I ask Dave to make a motion just to include that report back to the full board with all of the requested clarifying information that was requested today as part of the discussion?
I don't think anything further. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
I'll make that motion and refer the issue of the contract length back to the board along with a general report, which I think the chair generally prepares as to what occurred here at the committee to incorporate just general concerns and comments that came up. And that would be the motion.
And I will second that. And I don't think I think we do need a roll call. So David, can you do a roll call vote?
Vice Chairperson Cortese. And Chairperson Chavez.
Yeah, thank you, Colin.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, and thank you. And I want to thank all the speakers, and thank you for staying with us. And we did receive the report from the Juvenile Justice Commission, so we'll definitely take a look at that. And Dave, thank you. And everybody have a safe, happy Thanksgiving. Be well, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Thank you.
Thank you all.